there's two things that kill me about this. One, I think private equity guys who are profiteers don't get to be the president. That's my... If there's any justice in this world, if being the president of the United States has any collective public role, then that guy doesn't get to be the president.
Why not?
Because private equity is a bad thing. It might be a necessary thing, and there might be an economy that demands it, but it is a bad thing. Because private equity...
Has there ever been like a business person? Has there ever been someone like Mitt Romney?
Well, he's not a business person.
But has there ever been somebody like him?
Sure. Well...
whose background is somewhere outside of politics? I mean, Ronald Reagan comes to mind, but he was then a governor for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, he was a governor, and Bush, I mean, just like Romney, you know, Bush was a governor, but before that, he was an oil guy and ran a... Look, I have no problem with someone moving from the business sector at all and becoming the president. Yeah. That's not a problem. Private equity is not business. Private equity is a little teeny piece of the capitalist system where the entire enterprise is set on extracting profit. Private equity is solely in the business of making money for its...
From other people's money.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's strictly trying to say, how do we extend profits to our investors? That's it's not business. So if, and this is the thing about private equity, if it means that when we buy a company that's distressed, they look around, they find distressed companies, and they say, what could we do to gain the most profit from that company? That's what private equity guys do. They don't hide it. Mitt Romney doesn't. It's not like I'm exposing something about the private equity market, the private equity world. They wouldn't say, this is what they do. They look for companies that are in trouble and need equity, need money. They need an infusion of cash. And they do it because they believe that they will return a profit.
And it's an incredibly high-risk venture. If you look at the number of times they do return a profit,
yes,
it's not a great return.
Right. It is. There are sometimes those deals don't work.
Yeah.
Yes. Their only concern is, does it return profit? Not do we add jobs, not do we create a product, not anything.
Do something good for society.
Do something good. So business, even though people say this all the time, well, all businesses exist for profits. No, profits in some businesses are part of the reason for the business. Most business people are not in business strictly for profit. Any business person who would say the sole reason I'm in business is to extract a profit, well, then you get put in the category of a Mitt Romney, right? If all you're doing, if you're not making meaning, if you're not generating something that people need, if you're not treating your employees or your customers well, if you're not a part of the entire system that makes human endeavor important, then I would throw you in the same category as a private equity guy. The truth of it is, every other business has to treat everybody well or they go out of business. That's not true of private equity guys. It's so bad that even venture capitalists hired lobbyists, the venture capitalists community hired lobbyists to make the point that venture capitalists are not private equity guys. Private equity guys are so bad that even the venture capitalists, because what venture capitals say is, what's your business and how could we invest in it so that the venture is successful?
Right, and they sometimes will look at philosophy and business plans and practices.
All that stuff. How can we put money into your business so your business can be successful? That is not what private equity guys do. Private equity guys say, how can we put money in your business so that we can extract the profits? And that's the fundamental. This is why Newt Gingrich and Rick Perry were trying to say to in the primaries, look, there's fair capitalism, and then there's private equity guys like Bain Capital.
Yeah.
They are a teeny little sliver that exploit the system for their own profits.
Well, and so
there is no way around it, and the fact that here's why Obama didn't bring it up, because his big donors and funders are private equity guys. So it's one thing to know that, okay, that happens and people get funded by it, but for the very face of that industry,
So how do you think? Why do you think then that that's inconsistent with government, with governing the country?
Because that view, the view that you have formulated, the perspective of the world that you have spent your life refining, does not give you the perspective nor the sensitivity to believe that that you can speak on behalf of the entire system. Mm-hmm. You can't spend your life as a private equity person who is also a moral person, which Mitt Romney is, and thinks that that's a good idea, right? So look, if Mitt Romney had fessed up and said, look, I spent my life in private equity, and what we did in private equity, I want to step away from that. I've reconsidered it.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's how I want to spend the rest of my life.
Or even to say that was a way of running a business. It's not a way to run a government.
Right.
And I see the differences.
Sure.
I see what I need. My other skill set is this one.
If he had said that life, that world, that endeavor, I can't. That's not what I do anymore. But what he says is, of course, the budget that I've proposed balances. I'm a business person. I ran businesses. He says, based on what I did in private equity,
that's what I can do.
That's what which is why the 47% comment was so poignant, because he looks at the world in profits and losses. And that is what I guess we need in our economic system. Fair enough. That's not the role that the federal government plays, and it's not the role that the president that's not the background that a president in the federal government system should have, in my view. There are some jobs that, in my view, if you've had them, that has shaped you in a way that I find you no longer to be trustworthy to speak on behalf of all the people. If we had can you imagine for a minute if certain conservatives had heard that a candidate had spent his life in helping Middle Eastern countries establish their government and their rule? Like, so what I did for my job, candidate says, is I worked with Saudi Arabia and I worked with Qatar, and I helped them figure out how. This is what I did. I was a consultant for Middle Eastern monarchies. And I'll tell you, I mean, I learned a lot, and I was really super successful. There would be people who say, no, if you spent your life doing that, you then don't get to be the president, because that seems like those commitments might make it hard for the rest of us to trust your current commitments to this government. I don't think that's a stretch. I would just put private equity in that same category.
Yeah. Well, it's particularly distressing.
So I know I'm the only person that cares, me and Newt Gingrich.
Well, I think we have so little sense of collective goodwill in our country. And what are we? We're pull yourself up by your bootstraps. We're, individualistic. And we have so little sense of collective goodwill. As a nation, that's not really our personality in general.
Right, and I think because of that, there are people for whom Mitt Romney's background feels like he's this. And he's not even a self-made man, right? Like,
no,
borrow money from your parents.
No.
Borrow money
from
nobody's self-made.
No, and he in particular comes from a lot of money. So he had, he's a trust fund guy. He had, went to Ivy League school. Like, he had everything handed to him, and then he did something with it. And I think there are people who are like, hey, that's his prerogative. He gets to do that.
He worked hard.
He worked hard, and he did that, and he made money for his. So there are people, I think, who value that. It's not even that they're ignoring it. I think they look at it and go, "Oh no, that's what every American should strive to be."
That
kind of guy.
I know, and that's to me the maddening nature of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Is that so? Then here's what gets me. Then conservatives, the particular wing of conservatives, the libertarian conservatives, the Tea Party conservatives, that crowd, the Paul Ryan crowd, who are like, we're the fiscal people.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable to me how much they've been silenced. Right? That group where they're supposed to be so smart in their math.
His running mate.
His running mate. Like that
the
guy.
The austerity guy.
Yeah, that is like, the numbers work. And it makes me so. It's not that I hate Republicans. I think we could get by fine with a Republican administration. I don't think it has to be bad foreign policy or bad economic policy like Bush had. There are conservatives and Republicans who don't have those views, and it's possible for those things to work. It's just not Mitt Romney, for the love of it all.
I think we should start a write-in campaign. Doug Pagitt for president?
Yes.
Oh, Victoria, no. That is a bad idea.
Well, I would
you
even...
know what? Then he'll put people like us in his cabinet.
I know.
We'll just be like, yes, Mr. Pagitt, yes, President
Yes.
Pagitt, whatever you say, President
I want to be a
Pagitt.
speechwriter.
Yeah.
There you go.
So
we could work things in there.
I would even... So someone like me, right, with my background, I don't get to be president.
Because you're a pastor.
In my view. Yeah, because I'm a pastor. I think I've spent
He's a pastor. He said that out loud in one of the debates. Why does he get a pass on that?
Well, because it's
because he's not actually a pastor.
Well, no, in that world, in the Mormon world.
I know, but he said it.
He's a pastor.
And again, he just goes, whoosh, whoosh.
He is a pastor,
Pastor,
but he's a volunteer
He's a
pastor
bishop.
because their whole system is volunteer, which doesn't, in my mind, disqualify him on those religious grounds.
Well, why does it disqualify you then?
Because I have chosen, and it wouldn't disqualify all pastors. I have been publicly opinionated about views of religion and an understanding of God and the way I think the agenda of God works in the world.
Yeah, the Christians aren't going to be voting for you anytime
That
soon.
other people could not, I don't think, trust that I could speak on their behalf because I hold such definable positions on topics that many people find to be more open and free. So let's say Keith Ellison, who's a Muslim, Minnesota congressman. If Keith Ellison had been an imam and spent his life as an imam, advocating publicly, that would then cause people to have to say, hang on, this guy has made commitments to a particular theological view of the world that's going to shape everything. I'm not sure they'd be trustworthy. I don't think I would be trustworthy as a Christian who has done that. I think there are certain roles that you've played in your life that give you a set of commitments that make it difficult for you then to be trustworthy. So I'm not just down on the... It could be a positive thing you've made commitments to. Yeah. I have a lot of rules about this.
No private equity, no religious background.
No, it can be a religious background, but you can't spend your life like a regular. Not to be dismissive of my regular Methodist pastor friends, a regular old Methodist pastor in their background, or
Presbyterian.
Who's a Southern Baptist?
What might be considered extreme views or outside the box or unorthodox views?
No, not the unorthodoxness. I've tried to be a leader in these ideas.
I see. So Romney being just a follower of Mormonism doesn't create any problem.
That's not the same kind of problem as someone who was a Southern Baptist guy from Arkansas, Huckabee. Huckabee was a Baptist.
Huckabee.
He was a Baptist pastor, but he's kind of a normal, ordinary Baptist pastor who never thought anything original about religion. He wasn't a public religious figure. He was a private, inside of a private situation, religion. And people are going to be sort of comfortable with, like, look, if your commitments are sort of normal religious commitments and you did that job, that's fine. But once, like a guy like Billy Graham doesn't get to then be president, right? Because someone like Billy Graham has been public in his views. And so people who have chosen in their life to take on the forming and shaping of religious understanding and identity, they also don't get to be the president.
So you're not running, is what you're going to say.
So on this day, I announced my non-candidate.
Easy way to say, "Oh, I'm not going to."
Yeah, I mean, I would.
It's an easy out.
I would, but I couldn't win.
I mean,
I
don't beg me.
Because of my
don't beg me.
background.
Don't beg me.
Otherwise.
No, what I'm getting at is, I'm not just being hard on Romney's prior commitments.
I see.
I'm hard on anybody who has particular prior commitments. So if you've helped monarchies establish themselves, if you've been a public religious voice advocating a certain, even if it's tolerance and togetherness, it's overly religious for that role. And if you've been a private equity guy.